His name is Dr. Frank Tedesco. Jai Bhim and good morning, Dr. Frank. He is a director. Yeah, he is a director of True Dharma International Buddhist Mission Incorporation, and he will present his topic on Dharma, the end of life and rebirth, living and dying well in America. So I will hand over to Dr. Frank. Thank you very much for joining, Dr. Frank.
Okay, thank you. This is kind of a surprise. It's kind of, can you hear me well? I'm trying a new,
yes.
Okay. I was expecting to be edified by a Dharma talk before my talk, and I was going to follow on the Dharma talk, but I guess I'm here now. I did indicate that I wanted to show the trailer of my film in an email to you. Can we do that before I begin speaking?
Sure, absolutely.
Do you have a link to it? Yeah, go back a little bit. That's great. Well, before you begin, let me introduce myself a little bit more. Okay, this project called the Good Death Auspicious Rebirth Film Project is being funded by the Uberoi Foundation. It's an American-based foundation for the promotion of Dharma teachings, the Dharma traditions of India in the United States. A very successful aeronautical engineer, Dr. Uberoi, left millions of dollars to a foundation for the promotion of education about the four Dharma traditions of India as he perceived them: Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism. So every year, the Uberoi Foundation has expert meetings discussing the four Dharma traditions. I gave a presentation about 4 or 5 years ago on my volunteer hospice work as a Buddhist chaplain, working with the dying, both in Korea, where I lived for many years, and here in Florida. They'd never had a presentations like that about really down to earth, what happens in real life and real death, Dharma, you might say. So the executive director asked me to write a foundation grant, which I did. And that started me on this process of studying death and dying in the four Dharma traditions. My main background is Buddhism. I have a PhD in Buddhist studies. But to meet the demands of the foundation, I began delving into Hinduism, Sikhism, and Jainism, and their approach to death and dying. When I gave presentations at hospitals and hospices at grand rounds about my research work, the staff unequivocally said this was really too difficult for them to understand. All the Sanskrit terminology, all these concepts they had never had any contact with in their education. So they asked me to do some kind of audio-visual, and that launched me, their suggestion launched me on this film project of the Good Death Auspicious Research Film Project. And now we can begin. It's only about 4 minutes long, and then from there, I can continue to talk about my work and answer any questions you may have. So let's continue. Thank you. Can you, okay. Oh, what happened to the sound? I can't hear it.
We cannot hear Vivek Bhau.
Not able to hear?
No.
No. Yeah, we
Okay.
can hear it now.
And now we got. Maybe turn it down a bit. It's a little bit too loud.
Frank Tedesco. I'd like to take a moment to talk with you about
Sorry to interrupt. Can everyone mute their laptops and phones? Yeah, you can restart again. Thank you.
This is not an ordinary training film project. It's more like a life and death mission. It may even be my own very last undertaking. I'm now 73 years old. The clock is ticking. I know I will not be here forever. Everyone watching this video is going to die also, sooner or later, suddenly or gradually, in one way or another. Let's prepare a graceful exit and make our dying a gift and a model for others to learn from. Here in America, whatever our beliefs or none, we want to live long and carefree lives, and when we die, we want to die peacefully and content. We want our loved ones near us also. The ancient Dharma traditions of India have addressed living correctly and dying well over millennia. A conscious and predictable good death is a sign of spiritual liberation from the cycle of birth and death in this very lifetime. Having a clear or faithful state of mind at the moment of death portends an auspicious rebirth. A fresh life provides many opportunities for spiritual progress and eventually ending the karmic cycle of birth and death through endless lifetimes. Many people of the Dharma traditions of Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism are dying in a cold healthcare system that rarely acknowledges their different understanding of life and their Dharmic values. Death in this life is not a final curtain call, but a chance to change costumes for the next act, of which there have been many before. The Good Death Auspicious Rebirth program will share Dharmic perspectives with healthcare professionals who serve people of all ages who are very ill, sometimes severely traumatized, and who die quickly or over days or weeks. Doctors, nurses, and chaplains know very well that they themselves are mortal, and their loved ones also. Hopefully, their lives and work will become more meaningful, a little more open and reflective, by learning about these ancient Indian traditions as they are actually practiced. We have been interviewing and partnering with scholars and spiritual guides and healthcare professionals as our subject matter experts. These seasoned experts and practitioners contribute practical and life experience, insights, and wisdom that can engage the feelings and intellect of our audience. Our training program entails distinct modules focused on end of life in each of the four Dharmic traditions. We are designing this work to help nurture understanding and compassion for both the living and the dying, and those who serve them. May we all have a deep and peaceful heart and a brilliant, luminous mind when we die. Your generous support of our Good Death Auspicious Rebirth project is very welcome. We also invite you to contribute your wisdom and experience to this project. Thank you.
Dr. Frank, you can unmute your,
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay. So that film, I hope you could understand it, hear it well. On my side, it was a lot of static, a lot of noise in the background. How was the reception on your side? Clear? Did the audience hear
it? Was okay. We were able to hear. Not very clear, but we were able to understand.
Okay, we'll have to improve that in the future. Yeah, so here is this project where, as a Buddhist, I've been approaching the Dharma traditions of India as they are practiced here in the United States on the topic of death and dying, preparing to die, which is a very difficult for all of us to handle, most of us. The very wise have been preparing themselves to die from birth, as we are taught in essential Dharma, Buddha Dharma. But most of us do not take that teaching very seriously. We're caught up in worldly affairs, education, making money, getting married, having children, raising our children, dealing with the ups and downs and fortunes and misfortunes of life. And until something happens to us that challenges our illusions, that challenges our happiness, most of us do not reflect on how we're going to end our lives, what is going to be the end of our life. So I've been concerned about this all my life, about dying, because when I was very young and growing up at middle school age, my grandparents died in our home under my mother's care. And I was very close with them. And so I knew that death was a reality from early on in my life. In fact, I was the one to tell my mother that her mother, my maternal grandmother, had died. She was afraid to enter the room, but she feared that that was the case. So that really sobered me up and led me to a more philosophical approach to life. I just couldn't take many things that were taught in school, many of the values that were being inculcated in the school system on Long Island, New York, very seriously, because I knew that this was short-lived, that ultimately it was going to pass. All things are passing. Everything is anicca, impermanent. So wherever I've gone in my travels and my studies, death has been in the background. So my PhD dissertation, which I worked on in South Korea, was on Buddhism and the practice of abortion, which is a very common practice everywhere in the world, but particularly common in developing countries that want to control their populations very quickly. And what I learned, I was writing a dissertation, I had begun to write a dissertation on death and Buddhism in Korea. Then I received an invitation to contribute a chapter to a book on Buddhism and abortion, published at the university by Damien Keown, an eminent Buddhist scholar at the University of London. When I realized that there had been no research done on Buddhism and abortion in Korea and in many parts of the world, even though it's commonly practiced, and even though it's a direct contradiction to the first precept of harm, not harming. So I began making inquiries, and first among my immediate circle of friends. That led to visiting hospitals. It led to a lot of statistical surveys that were already done by the Department of Health of the government of Korea. Then I started interviewing monks and nuns, and I discovered that they had developed a special ritual to assist mothers and fathers who had performed abortions, who had aborted their babies. And this is in South Korea now. And I discovered that the abortion rate in South Korea at that time, not too long ago, actually in the mid-90s, was 5 times the rate of abortion in the United States. 5 times the rate of abortion in the United States. And in fact, many of the abortions were sex selective. More baby girls were disposed of, killed in the womb than boys. Of course, there's male preference in Confucian societies, as you have male preference in India. Some of you know that male preference and male abortion in India is very widespread. And in certain provinces, the number of boys in school far outnumber the number of girls. And there are certain hospitals in India that haven't given birth to a live girl child in years. The infant females, the baby in the womb, are disposed of before they're allowed to be born. Or the woman are disposed of their infant daughter in the womb before they enter the hospital at all. So that was quite an eye-opener for me, and I studied this abortion, this ritual for aborted baby process very intensively, participating in the rituals with monks and nuns and the mothers, for the most part, who had had abortions. And then we're not talking about one abortion. We're talking about women who have had 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 abortions. Abortions became a form of birth control in South Korea. They're also very popular in Japan, in Taiwan, Thailand, but I happen to be living in South Korea and became close to those monks and nuns who were performing the rituals and to the mothers. And I observed as an anthropologist and as a fellow Buddhist the entire process. And it was fascinating, the whole psychological process, because I saw that the Buddhist ritual for the auspicious rebirth of the babies who had been killed in the womb was absolutely fascinating. It entailed very strenuous, lengthy prayers. I should say, began with study of what childbirth, what pregnancy actually is. Some of the females, the women in South Korea, as well educated as South Koreans are in general, didn't understand just really the whole process of insemination, pregnancy, the growth of the infant in the womb. So to make this a more vivid and profound experience for the mothers, the monks and nuns who led the rituals had 6, 8, 10-week-long courses in which they educated the babies, the mothers, about their babies, about what they had done in the process of aborting their children. The women sought out these monks and nuns to perform this ritual because they were deeply grieving. They were very upset and very regretful and guilty they had done this. Many of them felt that the misfortunes in their lives, the car accidents, the bankruptcies, difficulties with their current children, their living children, with their husbands, failure of their businesses, even accidents that were occurring frequently in South Korea, bridges falling down, building collapses, all kinds of industrial accidents were caused by the unhappy spirits of aborted babies, because there are so many of them around. And even Christians were thinking this, the children and young people who I interviewed, I was teaching university at the time, would talk about the presence of unhappy spirits that would try to get the attention of their parents, of living people, by performing mishaps. So I began joining. The only way to really become part of this ritual, whether to be about participant observer, is actually participating in the auspicious rebirth rituals with them. So they, in Korea, which is Mahayana Buddhism, Korea practice a form of Mahayana Chan Buddhism, or like Zen practice. There's a 49-day ritual that occurs after a person dies, a grown-up adult person dies. For 49 days, there's systematic prayers and many prostrations, bowing, offerings to the monks and nuns, offering to poor people, dana that's given to the poor, release of animals that are suffering, waiting to be slaughtered, fish and birds, dogs and cats, releasing them to be free and not suffer. At the ritual, during the rituals, everyone would do 108 prostrations, full bows, not just a common kneeling or bowing from the waist, but getting on the floor with one's knees and putting one's forehead to the floor and rising up and going down, up and down for 108 times. Very common Buddhist practice. In fact, they would do that frequently in South Korean Buddhism is very athletic. People vowed to do 1,000 prostrations or 1,008 prostrations. They even have prayer beads, malas that have 1,008 beads, not just 108 beads, but 1,008 beads that have to be carried around in a bag from place to place. So besides doing the process and the long chanting of certain sutras, there would also be offering on the altar of items that the aborted baby would like. Containers of milk, rattles, toys, trinkets that children would play with. I mean, offering them an offer so that the spirit of these things could be noticed and would be attended to by the spirits of the aborted babies. The monks and nuns also urged their Buddhist followers who had had abortions, who were going through this ritual, to do volunteer service at orphanages, at homes for sick children, but particularly to orphanages, or even to consider adopting a child if not possible. And if not adopting a child, supporting a child that would be given to a family that may not have very much money, but who was willing to adopt a child in themselves to help support the child. And this would go on for 49 days. Depending on the zealousness and the need of the woman, her feelings. And of course, there would be a lot of confession, of reading out loud. In one of the long Korean prayers, it's a prayer of confession. Every time you bow, you indicate that which you feel sorry for. You admit and confess all the acts against life that you performed, all the acts of lying, all the acts of greed, all the acts of jealousy, all the ill will that you have carried and expressed to other people, all the times when you drank too much, and drinking is very common in South Korea. A lot of people drink. There's great tolerance for drunkenness in South Korea. It's one of the common ways. It's everywhere in South Korea. Soju is drunk everywhere. In fact, it's the alcoholic beverage that's most consumed in the entire world is South Korean soju, a kind of a fermented rice wine. A lot of people drink and a lot of people overdo it. So there's a lot to confess when you're working, when you're in the temple or you're in front of a monk and nun in front of the altar, confessing your misdeeds, as it were. And you ask for forgiveness. And in time, and have done sincerely, with complete honesty, really with great sensitivity to oneself, really listening to one's inner ear through mindfulness meditation, not running, not dodging the issues, not dodging your guilt, not escaping from your misdeeds, offering forgiveness. Was Buddha an Avalokiteshvara, Kuan Yin, Kuan Impulsal, the God, the Bodhisattva, infinite compassion, forgives you, but just don't do it again. So I got deeply immersed in that, and in that practice, and finished my dissertation, and it was published in that book by Damien Keown. That's background to my inclination to work on this film, Good Death, Auspicious Rebirth, to see, the purpose of the film is to familiarize American medical personnel with the Indian religious culture, Buddhism, Hinduism, the many different kinds of Hinduism that's practiced, with Jainism, and with Sikhism. I saw from my volunteer practice, my practice in American hospitals, that most hospital staff are clueless, know very little about Indian culture, Indian religions, unless they've been personally seeking themselves as spiritual seekers. And many of them are. Medical personnel are serious, philosophical. They confront sickness, aging, and dying very frequently, if not every day in their lives. But many have not bothered to study it very well, particularly with a focus on death and dying. So I've been interviewing monks and nuns and Buddhist chaplains, doctors of Hindu and Jain, Sikh doctors, Sikh teachers, about their approaches to death and dying, what to do, how to prepare from within the tradition for your own death, how to prepare the best possible kind and warm atmosphere in the hospital room, in the hospice room, so that the dying person can feel most comfortable. This letting the staff know that most people from India have large families here, and that the large families, extended family and friends and fellow practitioners in their temples, in their gurdwara, would want to come and visit the dying person and also bring food. So to let the medical staff know that this is to be expected in creating the atmosphere for the dying patient. as well as music and chanting that might be performed for the dying person. For instance, with Chinese Buddhists and Buddhists from Taiwan and Korea, the Mahayana Buddhists and the Japanese, there'll be chanting of to Avalokiteshvara, Kwanzaa Bosal, Kwanzaa Bosal, Kwanzaa Bosal, Kwanzaa Bosal. There'll even be, we even have chanting machines that have a tape. Not, it used to be a tape or a card in there that plays the sacred mantra chorus of the mantra over and over and over again in a little black box. I have one here with me. It's just a little black box the size of a phone, a cell phone, that you can put near the ear of the patient, the person who is dying, who's very ill, so they can hear it continuously, even if they're unconscious or in a stupor, even if you cannot communicate with them, so they can hear the sound and be soothed by the prayers. Also, to allow and not be surprised if the families bring photographs or pictures of deities, of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, to put on the wall around the hospital bed, so that the patient can look up at the and see a picture of Avalokiteshvara. Excuse me, can you hear that? Those are my dogs. We have 4 rescue dogs. Anyway, in fact, maybe the sound of my dogs yelping would be something I would want to hear in my deathbed, because I love these dogs so much. But anyway, so you have in the Hindu tradition, particularly followers of Krishna in the Hare Krishna movement, they have kirtan. They do singing of the Hare Krishna mantra and dancing with drums. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Here's something that was developed by the Krishna Hospice movement. This is a spiritual care kit that developed by an American convert to the Krishna movement, Sanjita, who's a hospice nurse who helped found the Bhaktivedanta hospice in India. And she leads hospice training for Hare Krishna followers in the United States. This particular kit contains all that is necessary, all that's needed, for the most part, to help prepare a Krishna devotional Krishna environment for the dying person. Here is soil from India that was from around a Krishna temple that's used to prepare to put a tilak on the forehead of the patient. Here are protective cords to wrap around the wrists of the dying patient. Here's a small vial of Ganges water to drop into the mouth of the dying patient, as well as place on their forehead and on their top of their head, the blessed water from the Ganges. Another here's a sample of an altar cloth that was used to wrap and decorate idols figures of Krishna that that can be placed on the chest of the deceased before they're led into the crematoria, because of course they're going to be cremated. So the Krishna people have been very, ISKCON followers have been very focused on this, on these practices, because there are thousands and thousands and thousands of Hare Krishna families living all throughout the United States. And many of them who converted to the movement when their great teacher, Bhaktivedanta Swami, came to the United States in the 60s. And now they're in their late 60s and 70s and 80s, and they're preparing to die, and they want to die in the atmosphere, in the spiritual atmosphere with devotees around them. So that's one aspect. That's one aspect of the Hindu component of my of the film I'm doing. Does anyone have any questions? Because it's better to respond to any questions you may have. Anyone have any questions for me?
Yeah, team. Anyone have any question?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
Well, this question of abortion,
Mm-hmm.
I would appreciate knowing from you, aside from Christianity, in which, of course, there are so many devout Christians who oppose abortion of any kind. What is the attitude derived from other religions, like even Hindu religion and Sikhism and Jainism, etc.?
Well, okay. Please
Yeah.
Continue.
And whether they are concerned about, like, actually the Christians think that at no cost abortion should be allowed. And whether they take into consideration that somebody may have been raped and she didn't want to be, didn't want to bear that child. So even then they say that doesn't matter, no matter what, you got to bear the child to the full fruition, as if she is kind of an incubator, that somebody has put some semen there and it has to now grow up, and she has to bear it for 9 months. And then even after that, the people who oppose abortion are not prepared to contribute anything towards, towards growth of the child, towards the anything. So what is your personal?
Thank you for your question. That's very important. That's one of the reasons why Damien Keown published this book, edited this book on Buddhism and abortion. Was in this book, he's gathered very good research of many scholars who have studied abortion in different Buddhist countries, in the Theravada countries, the Mahayana, even in the Vajrayana, among the Tibetans and all. their attitudes towards abortion. Let me begin by saying that the Buddhist approach, at least from the Buddhist teachers I've spoken to, and what I've read in the teachings of like the Dalai Lama and some other great teachers in Thailand and Korea and in many other countries, their approach is much more nuanced. Although the first precept is against killing, the entire circumstance of the mother and the family has to be taken into account. And if it was a rape, or the child would be born very malformed, incurring great suffering both for the baby and for the parents and for the greater family around them, when the mother has to make the decision, the full responsibility is on the mother, even though she'd be highly pressured from a husband and in-laws and others. But the mother has to make the decision what to do with her own body, and if she chooses to abort the baby. However, that it's very difficult, but may be better in the long run based on one's reason, one's perception of the circumstances, and how one foresees the future. But one does not get a free pass. There is always consequences for our actions. But one can alleviate, one can counteract or counterbalance those consequences by doing it in a spirit of love, by being generous to others, by fostering life in other ways. But one will always have, as it were, the stain of killing in one's karmic stream. But we have lots of stains in our karmic stream, as it were. But we just have to do as best we can to counteract them with good deeds. So one shouldn't feel inordinately guilty, although one will feel some guilt and chagrin and sadness for doing so. But one was to take a middle path and not be extreme against killing and against abortion in any form for any reason, as you have among the diehard Catholics, for instance. So it is forgiveness, in Buddhism for that.
And one more question, please.
Sure.
If after the sperm meets the egg and gets fertilized, egg is a zygote. I don't know if I'm using the correct name. And if they care so much about it, why? You see, the sperms have tail and they have half-life. Likewise, the eggs are also other part of the life. And so you cannot say that all these sperms are lifeless and the eggs, they are half-life. So how about killing so many sperms? I mean, which do get killed in their normal fashion if they don't meet an egg. And so many eggs getting killed without meeting a sperm. So is there any kind of a penance that one has to do for these kind of killing sperms and killing eggs?
Not from my experience with the Buddhist and Buddhist scriptures that I have read. The Jains have a very, very strict adherence to ahimsa, of nonviolence, of harmlessness. That topic hasn't come up in my discussion with them, but I will bring that up. The Jains may think that definitely is. So the Jains are convinced that the human life itself is bad karma, that we must suffer. That's why they fast and ideally fast unto death and do not eat anything anything at all that's affiliated with the killing process whatsoever. And in the extreme form, the Jain monks, like you saw in my video, the trailer, they wear nothing at all, so that no living being is harmed by the clothing that's manufactured that they would wear. They try to live as harmlessly as possible, eating only foods that grow above the ground that can be plucked, not foods that grow underground. No potatoes, no onions, no garlic, and nothing that grows underground. Only greens, as it were. That's the Jain perspective. I should mention that abortion was practiced in Buddha's time. And even in the earliest Theravada scriptures in Pali, there are a number of instances where monks and nuns are castigated for giving herbs to a young woman who sought abortions, or for hiding an aborted baby fetus in their begging bowl, or trying to cover up someone's abortion. And there are certain penances that the monks and nuns had to perform when they were caught in these deeds with associated with abortion, by the way. So abortion is a very old practice going back from 2600 BC and earlier. It's been practiced.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions about that or anything?
One more hand raised from Mr. Govardhan Wankhede.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Frank, very much for your presentation and the topic. Especially, I am exposed to first time in my life and the career, and the topic being absolutely new to me as a lay person. I may not be able to frame the question right now properly, but would like to know or understand from you that the birth and death ceremonies are celebrated according to the social and cultural layer of the community or the society. They are not the one for all.
Right.
Like for in India, even Hinduism, even among the Jains and the Sikhs. You can correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not the person from the discipline or the subject. But then what I have observed in my life, I have seen around like those who opt and prefer and dream for dying at the pilgrim place during the festivals and at the temples and the rivers. Now, their methods of celebrating birth or the death are different according to the layer, social layer, cultural layer they are living in the particular society. Now, the point is this, that when you talk of Hinduism, when you talk of Sikhism, classically, yes, they are one, Hinduism and the Sikhism or Jainism. But in practice, they are not the same. Whether it is ritual, whether it is purity pollution concept, whether, you see, like for example, after the funeral, you come back to the home, you are supposed to be polluted, hence take the bath. Now, my point is this, the death and dying environment situation and the condition differ from community to community, caste to caste, and religion to religion. How to catch that? That's the point. Maybe I'm not able to frame the question properly. I'm sorry for that.
Well, what I found, of course, that we all die, whether we're rich or poor, sick or healthy, privileged or not very privileged, upper caste or lower caste. I mean, that's a commonality that we all share. The wealthy can spend more money on their medical care, have access to better hospitals, better doctors than the poor. But no matter how much they spend, they get Yama is always there. Is going to devour them. Okay, they're going to die. And in their funeral rituals, they are much more ornate. They found in Korea a wealthy person Korean Buddhist who dies, the families will spend extraordinary amount of money feeding monks and nuns in large chanting ceremonies. And they'll publish books in honor of the deceased person, particularly Buddhist scriptures. And everyone, and when 100 or 500 people go to the temple for the funeral service, particularly on the 49th day, the books will be available, and people, like a bound sutra book, they'll put them on their head. And I've participated in this, they'll put this on the head and circumambulate around the temple, chanting Namo Amitabha, Namo Amitabha, Namo Amitabha. Making merit for the auspicious rebirth or the better rebirth of the person who died. But ultimately, it's a matter of how one's inner environment, how one dies, that counts. You can be a very wealthy, upper-class person who is very bitter, miserable, feeling guilty, or not, very cruel, and then die kicking and screaming, or fade away, and no one really caring about you. And it may be obvious on the deathbed that this person is dying, get rid of him. Good riddance. I've seen all different kinds of experiences like that. If you spend any time in hospice care around the dying situation, you'll see that families and friends react very differently to the dying. Either they ignore them or they smother them, because there's so much attachment. But ultimately, we all need to prepare for our passing.
Yeah.
We just have to grow up and realize that for the earliest teaching that we're born to die. In some Buddhist traditions, particularly in Tibet, the monk will weep because someone has been born, knowing that they have a life of suffering ahead of them. And they'll celebrate their death, knowing that the suffering in this life has finally passed. Just last night, a Bhante, a Sri Lankan monk who was actually taught at the Ambedkar Center, Bhante Sujata, gave a Dharma talk here in Florida. He was visiting, gave Dharma, and he made a remark that shocked everyone. He said that we have all these prayers, and we wish a long life on all of our monks and nuns and everyone in the audience. We wish long life, but don't we realize, my goodness, long life means more suffering, more misfortune, more complaints, more opportunities to be hurt, more opportunities to hurt people. we should say, my goodness, we should pray for shorter lives, get the suffering over with already, so can we reborn happily somewhere else in a better place. He shocked everyone with that remark, because many of the elderly people in the crowd in the Sangha around him.
Thank you.
So, yeah. I really do recommend people look into this. And now that we have the internet, we can Google Buddhism and abortion. You can find, again, this book, Buddhism and Abortion by Damien Keown. It's a hot topic. American converts to Buddhism are particularly interested in preparing for death.
Uh-huh.
In fact, what's one of the major reasons many Americans, or Europeans, have looked into Buddhism, because they feel that Buddhism gives a much more rational, sensitive understanding of impermanence than the Western religions or this humanistic, scientific approach to life. We're much more than a biological function. We're a spiritual being that needs, and we need to cultivate compassion in our lives. We need to cultivate generosity. We need to cultivate love for others.
Yeah.
That's what, and when we do generous acts and when we help others, we feel lighter within. Is a light feeling within. That's what enlightenment is. It's not just a light bulb going off in one's head. You think, what is enlightenment? They have this idea of enlightenment is what? A bolt of energy going up the spine and then the top of one head breaks apart. What is enlightenment? If it's truly being happiness and having equanimity with the ups and downs of life, well, that means dealing with that which is heavy within us, our heavy feelings. We talk about the situation brought us down. Speaking to my ex-wife brought me down. I had a car accident. Boy, that was a down experience. What a downer that was. We talk about down experiences, opposite of being light. So we want to become enlightened. Well, before you die, make sure that you've forgiven everyone and everything that has harmed you, that makes you feel bad, that makes you bear hatred in your heart. Confess the evil, the negative things, the harmful things that you've done to others, and ask for forgiveness. Ask for forgiveness of them. And if they don't forgive you, forgive you. If they can't forgive you, if they're already passed away, or if they're bearing a grudge, forgive yourself. You've tried your best. That's enlightening. That's how we prepare to die, so that we leave this world with a clear conscience, without leaving any baggage behind us. You know, people want to leave legacies of money and homes and cars and whatever. But the greatest legacy you can leave is a legacy of a happy death.
Yeah.
That you've made peace with life, and you'll let your life be an example for others to prepare to die peacefully as well. That's what's led me into this research and keeps me going in this film project.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Does anyone have any other question?
Yes, I have one question.
Yes, please.
So thank you very much, Dr. Frank, for your talk today. I heard references to abortion in Tipitaka you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. At least I have not come across those instances. I have come across a story of Bhante Kumara Kassapa, who was in his mother's womb when she was ordained as a bhikkhuni. And then Buddha arranged for his grown up, so for the birth of the baby. And after the birth of the baby, the baby was cared for by Pasenadi Raja and or one of the kings, the king disciples of Buddha. And after 7 years, he was ordained as a bhikkhu himself and attained arahanthood. So I have read those references, but abortion references I have not read in Tipitaka. So that was my first question, where if you can share those references, that would be good. And obviously, like in American lifestyle now, abortion is sort of an important topic that is part of the political debate. It is part of social life and everything like that. So their idea of trying to find references in religious studies would be more relevant too. So I really appreciate if you can share some thoughts on that side as well. So thank you very much.
I'm not a Pali scholar, but again, in this book, Buddhism and Abortion by Damien Keong, there's a chapter 8, Abortion in the Pali Canon in Early Buddhist Thought by James McDermott. James McDermott. He has quite an extensive bibliography with references to the Pali Canon. I would look that up. And nowadays, we're so fortunate, and we can Google anything. And I'm sure you can find that as well, especially on the Dharma sites. They're so extensive and so well done. Now, what was the second part of the question?
So second thought was the abortion being an important topic in American life, politically, yes, socially. Even it kind of hurts them with medical or economic strata and everything like that, being costly, not costly, easily available, not available, legally allowed, not allowed, all those things. So the whole life, the society in America kind of is consumed by this topic. So they trying to go and search for answers in religious text, Buddhist text, or whatever other religion they are trying to look for. So I think what is it that you have seen them come towards Buddhism for looking for these answers? What is it that, I mean, I know you talked about death and how to deal with death was primary source. Is abortion is also a similar topic that they are kind of trying to find solace or?
Well, okay, the abortion is an act of will, okay? And it's an act of intention to kill something. So, and one has consequences for what we do. It's simple law of karma. So I do believe that and most Buddhists, Western Buddhists I know, and are pro-choice. The woman must have the choice to make the decision for herself and should not be forced, prevented from having an abortion if she feels in her heart, in her best reasoned judgment, not to have an abortion, to abort. Of course, and you'll find there are Buddhist centers throughout the United States where practices similar to the Nakdea Chanduje, the Korean rituals for aborted babies, are performed. Became popular, or I shouldn't say popular, it became more common in the United States among Americans who converted to one form of Japanese Buddhism or another. They're called, in the United States, among Americans, they practice Mizuko Kuyo, which is Japanese for a water baby ritual for the water babies, which is it's the same thing as Nakdea Chanduje in Korean. And they're performed for anyone who wants the ritual performed at various centers in the United States. And if you can, again, you can find that easily by doing a Google search for rituals for if not for stillborns, not only aborted babies, but for stillborns and babies who have died very early in life as infants. And a very similar ritual procedure is performed. Lots of chanting, bowing, and volunteer work for in orphanages, helping families who have too many children and can't afford to care for them well, doing fostering life in any way. And if you can't do it with humans, do it with animals. Foster the life of animals. You become vegetarian or even vegan. Don't use any animal products at all. With milk, the milk industry, the dairy industry in the United States inflicts incredible harm on cows. And young calves are taken away, and male calves are taken away and butchered immediately. And baby female calves are taken away from their mothers so the machines can suck more milk from the overly bloated teats of their mothers. And then once the mother cow stops giving milk, she's led away to be slaughtered for we can celebrate with 4th of July hamburgers and whatever. We live in a very cruel society that does not show, it shows very little compassion, not for our little cute dogs and cats, but for what we eat. It's really horrible. So much against the first precept, so much against the whole concept of ahimsa, of harmlessness and love for all sentient beings. I had we must be running out of time. How much time do we have left?
If I could ask one more question.
If we have time, sure. Okay. Yeah.
What is the attitude of all these religions towards euthanasia, in particular, when the individual who is dying, himself or herself, wants to really die because he or she is being unable to bear the pain of, say, cancer or whatever else, or just sees no purpose in living alive anymore. So if he or she wants to die, so what is the attitude towards that of all these religions? And maybe
I can't speak about all the religions. I can speak about Buddhism that I know more about and have had more practice with than Sikhism and all the schools of Hinduism that exist. Again, actions have consequences. Actions have consequences. But it's a matter of attitude. It's a matter of state of mind, how it's performed. Now, you're talking about suicide, or you're talking about, in any event, the person who chooses suicide to drink something that will lead to their death in the state of Oregon, Washington, and a few other states, in California now. If they truly, again, all actions have consequences, but if it's done in a state of compassion for oneself and for others, at least it mitigates the negativity of the act of killing. If it's done in a way not to escape from suffering, but to face it and deal with it and end one's life to relieve the suffering of other people who will be taking care of you. Or but deeply indebting other people who may be taking care of you. There are mitigating circumstances. All these different factors have to be taken into account. Again, it's up to the individual themselves to make that decision. Should be what to do. Again, and if one is a doctor prescribing the medication for the end of life to someone, one has to face the consequences of one's actions and live with one's conscience. As simple as that. It boils down to actions have consequences, but what is one's attitude? What is one's mental state that one performs this action? If you do it out of animosity, out of greed, out of who knows any other negative feeling, those will have consequences as well. By the way, I like your Bernie cap.
Thank you.
You can say I'm politically lean towards you, as it were.
What about the doctor who used to perform euthanasia for people who wanted to die? You think he has to face any kind of consequence?
I am not the Lord of Karma myself. I don't know what will happen to him personally, but I do know that anyone who speaks about wanting to die, who is suicidal, should be counseled, should be spoken to, should be befriended for a long time to hear them out, hear what their feelings are, what their thinking is about this. It's not an act to be taken easily, to be taken quickly. You know, in Jainism, we call it a kind of sacrament. It's called salekana. I just recently interviewed a doctor about this, a Jain doctor, who's actually a teacher of anesthesiology at a medical school in California. He told me that his first wife, his mother and father, ended their lives practicing salekana. Now, what is salekana? Salekana is sacred dying. It is years in advance, understanding very well that one is going to die and performing vows, taking vows to cut down one's food and liquid, but also to pray and meditate and do deep reflection with a spiritual counselor, a monk or a nun who's trained in this, on how to prepare oneself for the next life, to purify oneself completely. You know, it's a very natural process for everyone, and all dying mammals anyway. I would say probably all dying things, but I'd say for human beings, to naturally cut down on food and kind of naturally fast, not wanting, they lose their appetite to eat. Well, one can have control over that. One can prepare for that by fasting, so that when one is at the point where one really no longer wants to eat, one can fast and do without food without any great suffering very easily. One isn't driven by hunger pangs. One has already given up really have already given up the desire for food, and then slowly cuts back on liquids until one's lips are only swabbed. This happens in hospices and in hospitals all the time with dying patients. But what the Jains have done, more or less, and the Jain is as old, if not older than Buddhism, they've incorporated the observations of the dying process into their actual spiritual practices. So one can, one can prepare this kind of salekana death 10 years in advance. And with a guru, a salekana trained acharya, teacher, prepare for for dying. And this involves everything, many of the things I've discussed before, giving away all material things, forgiving anyone and everything that has done any harm to you that makes you feel bad, by confessing what you've done and asking forgiveness of any being that you've harmed. Excuse me. Of course, you've already cut down on eating all animal products and taking milk products or dairy products. And if one doesn't die, when one was expected to die, whether it be from cancer or some other terminal disease, well, then one stops, reconsiders it, and you can take the vow again. So you're practicing dying while you're living. You're practicing your death while you're living. And I think that's a very profound and wise thing to do. And this has been done for so long in India that there are stone sanctuaries and caves dedicated to those holy beings. They considered holy beings who died in the process of Salakana. They're all over India, these sacred statues. And it's even practiced now in India, and even practiced in the United States among devout Jains. Any other questions about that or anything else?
Can I ask questions, Eilish?
Yeah, we have some time.
Yeah, I can ask. Thank you, Dr. Tedesco, for joining the call and highlighting about the different way of lives in different religious practices. I do hear that you have spoken about Thai, Chinese, and some most part of Indian religious dates. I failed to hear you talking about the how the practices are done in the Buddhist culture in India. Something that if you have spoken something I missed it, please do correct me. Is there any way you can highlight some the way the date is celebrated or practiced in Indian Buddhist culture?
Well, I haven't lived in India long enough to be around death rituals, dying Buddhist people. Although I sought them out when I was there, I couldn't find any through my networking in Nagpur and other places. It seems that from my experience, and that in India, at least among the Ambedkar Buddhists, they are inclined to receive their teachings from the Theravada, from Theravada teachings, or those Indians who have studied with Theravada teachers in Thailand or in India or other Theravada countries. So I don't think that their rituals would be very different than that, other than chanting at the bedside, meditation, doing vipassana, mindfulness meditation, chanting at the bedside, preparing the body for cremation, and then prayers afterwards for 3 days, or whatever the particular tradition is that one wants to practice. I think it would behoove the Ambedkar Buddhist community to, and especially now, and it's been sudden and many deaths have been forced upon them because of COVID, to take a very realistic assessment of the need for education about death, about hospice care among yourselves. Hospice care is for anyone in India is not very well developed, except in South India, particularly in Kerala. Kerala has a very developed hospitals and hospice training programs under palliative care. It's called the Palliative Care Association, located in Kerala. I would look into that. But I think that as Buddhists, one has to confront death, the reality of death. I know that the focus for many Buddhist converts and Ambedkar Buddhists is social betterment, getting good education to find good jobs and professions and take care of their families. I know that's very, very important. But while one is doing that, one also has to remember the teachings of sickness, old age, and death, and the impermanence of life, and take financial success and financial failure with a grain of salt. You know, one, again, to be enlightened at the time of death means free from grudges, free from feeling inferior, free from being a victim, free from feeling that one had the short end of the stick because one was born a Dalit. That's just social conditioning. That's outside of you. Your inner environment, your heart, is what has to be cultivated. As well, of course, you have to cultivate and progress in the outer world, but the heart, the training of the heart should not be neglected. It's very important to achieve enlightenment, have an enlightened life in this life. And as Dr. Wankede brought up last week, the psychological challenges facing Dalit students of the scheduled castes and tribes and all of us, they feel they are missing out on life. They're getting the short end of the stick. They've been suppressed by the upper castes. That may be true, but one does not have to carry those bad feelings in one's heart. One has to work with those feelings. Again, through acts of generosity, loving kindness, and achieving a balance and equanimity in one's personal relationships. But loving oneself, caring for oneself is very important.
Oh.
Thank you very much, Dr. Frank, for your guidance. So I think it's a time is also getting over, and I don't see any raised hands. So I think it's a time to.
I do have a question, brief question.
Okay, yeah. So as the time limit is very less, so I will appreciate the short answers. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay. In hospice, basically, we are taking care of everybody is taking care of somebody who is who is very old and can't take care of themselves, right? So
for the most part, although there are young people in hospices, if they have terminal cancer and other kinds of diseases, but there are young people. Okay.
Yeah. So, but so why don't we think of combining that along with taking care of the little children who really can't take care of themselves? So maybe orphans or, or even children from very, very, very poor homes. That may be a good combination.
Actually, bringing children to visit the people who are chronically ill and dying is very beneficial for the dying people, to bring some joy into their life. I don't have children to bring to the hospice, but I do have little dogs that make people very happy. The cute little things that many of the dying patients I've met have had dogs in their lives, and over the course of their illnesses and all, when they had to give away their pets, and those feelings of emotional fulfillment and joy are missing in their lives, and having even a short visit from some little fluffy thing they can play with, or having a baby, bringing a baby to a person who's very ill and dying is great therapy. It's really wonderful. For the most part, it makes them feel very good. I would really recommend it. And it's good for children to be, and it's good for children, even in religious education, to pay visits to hospices, the hospitals and hospices, so they can learn firsthand what it's all about. And we can incorporate Buddhist teachings in the field trip, as it were.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
No. Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. Especially special thanks to Dr. Frank for your support and guidance. And thanks, everyone, for attending this and asking these valuable questions. So we can visit again next week, same time, and we can call off the meeting. Jai Bhim, Namo.
Thank you so much, Jay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jai Bhim.